She was a well-behaved child.
She had average grades with satisfactory citizenship.
One day I came home and she was going to bring a cow into the house. It was raining. And this cow was mooing out there in the field, and she felt very sorry for her. And I explained to her that the cow wasn't mooing because it was raining. It was mooing for some other reason, for sure. And we didn't want the cow in the house.
She wanted to be a wife. She wanted to have children.
She wanted to be wanted. That's the main thing. And I guess she thought if she were a movie star, she'd be loved.
Most people want something from you, and she was always suspicious that people wanted something from her.
She had a sort of a acquiescent loser's philosophy. She had the greatest figure I think I've ever seen in my life, to this day. And I've seen a few of them.
If she could have settled to just be sort of a blonde movie star, you know, if she was dumber, she would have been happier.
The world called her Marilyn, as if it knew her well. And perhaps it did. Behind the grotesque sex goddess of the Hollywood glamour factory, the public recognized a more human figure. The game loser, trying to beat the odds. But the real Marilyn Monroe forever remained shadowy and elusive, even to Marilyn. Throughout her life, she pursued an endless search for a missing person, herself. This is the story of that search, the legend of Marilyn Monroe. Like an anonymous lover, the camera followed her everywhere, on her tours and journeys, her weddings and honeymoons, her interviews and publicity stunts. For Marilyn Monroe was an authentic star with her own bubbling, wide-eyed, innocent style, and above all, a magical inner radiance. She behaved like a star. There were the kisses blown to her fans, the public strut and wiggle. Behind the dazzle, the camera's pitiless curiosity also had exposed a face without makeup, face haunted by private torment. Yet few suspected that her hidden wounds might be mortal. Then came that hushed morning with its gallery of newsmen waiting in the thin sunshine. The appearance of death, unbelievable as always. And the unanswerable question, why?
I'm John Huston. By chance, I directed Marilyn Monroe's first major film, as well as her last. Marilyn had a strange, startling impact on the world. Even today, across the headlines of far greater events, her gentle, haunted image continues to appear. At her death, the world had looked for villains. It found only the troubling truths that life can be unfair and cruel, that we see human despair too late, that courage is not always enough. If bravery is measured by the fear it must overcome, then Marilyn's courage was great indeed. She was swept by panics. Her life was a continuing crisis.
It began in Los Angeles, and at once became a struggle for identity. Bits of her fragmented childhood now are scattered in the memory of obscure witnesses. and in the public ledgers of heartbreak and human failure. Although she grew up as Norma Jean Baker, her mother's last name by an early broken marriage, the birth certificate carried the name of Mortensen. It was an invention. She was illegitimate. Born June 1st, 1926, in the charity ward of the Los Angeles County Hospital, Norma Jean was taken 12 days later to a home in outlying Hawthorne. There she was placed in the hands of Ida Bolander, who, with her husband Albert, would act as foster parent for 8 years. At 10 months, violence shook the baby's world, and her grandmother, Della Monroe, went berserk.
She did come over one day, and for no reason that I know of, she just broke in the glass on our front door. And I believe we called the police, didn't we? Something happened.
Still in the old neighborhood, the Bollanders looked back on the hard years when boarding children helped earn a living.
We took her to Sunday school with us. Lots of times I not only had her and my own son, but I had other children too with me. So I couldn't always go because I couldn't have a haul of, 4 or 5 children at church with me. But they went to Sunday school if they were able.
Seldom alone, Norma Jean lived in a floating world of transitory relationships. 13 foster brothers and sisters came and went. Grown-ups appeared, disappeared. It was hard to know what was real, what to trust, even parents. Later, Marilyn said,
one morning I referred to the woman as Mama, and she said, I'm not your mother. Don't call me mother anymore. Call me Aunt so-and-so. But the one I was concerned was her husband. I said, but he's my daddy. She said, no.
Joy had been a random thing for Marilyn's mother, a young film laboratory worker. Gladys Baker's first 2 children had been taken by a former husband. Although she scrupulously paid $25 per month for her baby's care and took the child on outings, she remained a disturbing figure at the edge of Norma Jean's world. But for a moment, life had held a glimmering promise. Nearly 9, Norma Jean went to live with her mother, who had managed to make a down payment on a house near the Hollywood Bowl. Its most prized furnishing, a white baby grand piano. There was a rare, smiling photograph. 1 child, 1 mother.
We only had the home for about, I don't even think it was 3 months, because she was taken away, my mother.
Paradise was lost. Gladys Baker vanished behind the dark barrier of mental illness. Today, a gray, handsome little woman, she often strolls with Inez Melson, her guardian, at the sanatorium, where she lives under the provisions of Marilyn's will. But Marilyn herself is only a shadowed memory. Norma Jean's new home was a private orphanage in Hollywood. Now she was 1 child among 60.
I could read at 10. I saw orphans, and I put my feet down on the sidewalk, and they had to drag me in. I said, I'm not an orphan. I used to sit up in the window and cry because I'd look over at the RKO, and I knew my mother had worked there. She'd been a cutter there.
Norma Jean's world was drab and perplexing. But already, across her daydreams, glistened the fabled towers of Hollywood make-believe. Outwardly, she was learning to be what others wanted her to be. Her real life was spent in that inner world, where, as she said, you can make your own boundaries.
I didn't have enough to get into the movie, but I used to spend the whole afternoon, many Saturday afternoons, trying to fit my foot in a print that was usually too big. And also I would get down and measure my hands, and always they seemed a little large. I don't know, they had very small feet and small hands. I became very discouraged at an early age.
A friend of her mother, Grace McKee, became her guardian. When Grace married Irvin, Doc Goddard, She brought Norma Jean to their rambling ranch house in Van Nuys. But of the several homes in which she would live the next few years, her warmest memory would be of the months spent at Grace McKee's Aunt Anna Lauer. Aunt Anna had kept for her the single symbol of life with her mother, the white piano. Known at 12 as Norma Jean Stringbean, she attended Emerson Junior High near Aunt Anna's in Westwood, where she's remembered by her science teacher, Mabel Ella Campbell.
She was a youngster who looked as though she wasn't well cared for. Her clothes separated her a little bit from the rest of the girls. She was like a little girl, not well developed as some of the youngsters were. She just seemed like a nice child, but not very outgoing and not very vibrant.
Here today, there tomorrow. Always the outsider, Norma Jean still managed average grades. Then suddenly, she was Norma Jean Stringbean no longer. Girls cast envious glances. Boys whistled. In high school, Norma Jean was restless. She liked to run very hard. She never graduated.
Oh!
James Doherty, now a gun instructor with the Los Angeles police, was 21 when he married the 16-year-old schoolgirl who lived down the street.
Well, Doc and Grace were moving to Huntington, West Virginia, where Doc was being transferred. And Norma Jean was going to have to go back to an orphanage. Grace told this to my mother. And she was a little big for an orphanage, so my mother and Grace decided it might be a good idea if Norma Jean and I got married. And I guess the next day or the same day, I don't know, Mom asked me if I would like to marry Norma Jean. And the thought runs through my mind, this is a very young child. At 21, you feel like you're a pretty grown-up man. So I agreed to it anyhow, with the thought that I would be going into the service soon. And she would have a home with my mother while I was gone. She went along with the idea very well for a 16-year-old. I guess she thought this would be very enchanting. I thought it would be pretty enchanting myself. She was a good cook. And I recall that she always liked to mix carrots with peas because of the color. Not because she liked to eat them, but she just liked the color of them. They looked good on a plate. You know, I never knew Marilyn Monroe. I knew Norma Jean Doherty, Norma Jean Baker. But Marilyn Monroe and Norma Jean were two different people. Norma Jean was my wife. Marilyn Monroe was a glamorous movie star. I don't know anything about her life. I never talked to her. I just didn't know her.
When war came, Dorothy joined the Merchant Marine. Norma Jean became a worker in a defense plant. There, a flashbulb started the fairy tale. A swan among her plainer co-workers. She was chosen for a wartime publicity photograph, which found its way into a modeling agency.
Norma Jean looked like the girl next door, and I thought I could make her into something quite marketable in a short length of time. She was very beautiful in a clean-cut, American, wholesome way. Too plump, you would say.
Mrs. Emmeline Snively heads the Blue Book Model Agency, where Norma Jean underwent her first extensive alteration.
Magazine covers. We taught her photographic modeling, how to pose, how to handle your body, smile. She was always trying to lower her smile because she smiled too high, and that made her nose a little long. She had a different kind of knees than other girls. She couldn't just relax her knees and walk smoothly, but every time she'd take a step, her knees would go all the way back and make her bounce.
Eager, determined to learn, Norma Jean was quickly successful as a model. Her face and body, she was discovering, could be her ticket to the world. When Dorothy objected to her new career, she divorced him. Now she was free, 20, and on her way. In 1946, her appearance on 5 magazine covers in a month led to a beginner's contract at 20th Century Fox. Reluctantly, she traded her name for a new one, Marilyn Monroe.
I didn't have an opportunity to do anything, actually, during the year that I was there at 20th Century Fox the first time, except one part in Scudda Who Scudda Hey, and I was cut out of it. And then they dropped me.
She was thought of as a joke by many people. And I think this hurt her very deeply because she was very serious.
This is Harry Lipton, Marilyn's first motion picture agent.
O'clock at night, I told Marilyn when Fox had dropped her option, and her immediate reaction was the world had crashed around her ears and unhappiness and tears. And then, typical of Marilyn, she shook her head, set her jaw, and said, well, it really doesn't matter. After all, it's a case of supply and demand.
Undaunted, Marilyn made the rounds. Finally, at Columbia Studios, she read for a part and won the ingenue lead in the Quickie musical.
Ladies of the chorus, here to sing and dance for you. Our flirty, flirty eyes will wink in your direction. We will throw you all a kiss that's filled with sweet affection. Anyone can see I love you. Anyone can see I care. The way I hold your hand and smile in your direction tells the world my heart is filled with nothing but affection. Lock me in your arms forever. That's the place I want to be. So anyone can see that I belong to you and you belong to me.
With Ladies of the Chorus, Marilyn joined Hollywood's endless parade of movie starlets. Men about town whisked her from one nightclub to another, but Columbia dropped her. She bounced back in a one-joke walk-on in Love Happy with Groucho Marx. For the first time, she was the dumb, blonde sex pot, a role she never again would really escape.
Is there anything I can do for you? What a ridiculous statement.
Mr. Glenn, I want you to help me.
I have a little sand left. What seems to be the trouble?
Some men are following me.
Really? I can't understand why.
Although her career was getting nowhere, Marilyn was winning important allies. Natasha Lytez, drama coach, was the first of a series of mentors. Johnny Hyde, agent and close friend, ultimately engineered her first major opportunity. Meanwhile, she was forced to take jobs on the edges of show business.
This is the first car I ever owned. I call her Cynthia. She's going to have the best care a car ever had. Put Royal Triton in Cynthia's little tummy.
Right, lady.
Cynthia will just love that Royal Triton.
It was during these hungry days that photographer Tom Kelly made the shots seen around the world. Marilyn's famed nude calendar.
When I first asked her to do it, she turned me down. But after thinking it over for a few days, she came back and said, I would like to do it. I think it was partially a favor. I had done her a favor once before, and she really did need the money. This is a negative of the calendar of Marilyn that sold 8 million copies. It just happened to be a darn good shot, but I give all the credit to her.
In 1949, Marilyn was still one step from oblivion. Then she played the kept girl in The Asphalt Jungle, a film that I directed. And a spark jumped between her and the audience. I remember she impressed me more off the screen than she did on. There was something touching and appealing about her. And this, of course, is what people finally saw on the screen. what moved them. Now, at quickening tempo, the noise began. The parades, the hoopla, the stunts. Fox rediscovered her, launched the star build-up. The Body Beautiful was on display. In the next 4 years, Marilyn acted, danced, and sang through 16 films of growing importance. Her role stayed the same, the dumb blonde. Reviewers treated her as a freak, a backroom joke. But her rising popularity was reflected in a succession of awards.
And it's with honor and pride and pleasure I present this citation to you.
Thank you.
I'd like to present to you the Look Achievement Award as the most outstanding feminine newcomer of 1952.
Thank you, Lawrence.
And as Best Young Box Office Personality, Miss Marilyn Monroe.
Thank you, Mr. Nichols.
Marilyn Monroe, the moviegoers of America, voted you the most popular actress of the year. My congratulations.
Thank you, Mr. Sanders.
A showman's gimmick had turned a sidewalk into a pantheon of Hollywood's gods. Now, the Jane Russell, Norma Jean came back to Grauman's. Like the heroine of her own girlhood fantasy, Marilyn was accorded the immortality of wet cement. The hero was already immortal, Joe DiMaggio, baseball's retired Yankee clipper, whom Marilyn would always call my slugger. From a candlelit blind date in Hollywood, he'd pursued her to movie locations amid the breathless anticipation of gossip writers. DiMaggio wanted marriage. The days of grandstand glory behind him, he dreamed of settling down. Now he would discover that Marilyn's great days of acclaim were only beginning. Their wedding was an international event. Their honeymoon, which took them to Japan, began as a dash for privacy and became a series of welcoming riots. While DiMaggio stayed alone in Tokyo, Marilyn went on to entertain the troops in Korea. Waves of frenzied approval greeted her. It was, she said, like an embrace.
The highlight of my life was singing for the Souls there. I stood out on an open stage and it was cold, but I swear I didn't feel a thing except good.
The diamonds are a girl's best friend. A good friend. But it won't take a rattle on your humbug flat or help you at the automatic. Men grow cold, girls grow old, and we all lose our charms in the end. Yes, I don't care, safety run, don't lose that jet. Diamonds are a girl's best friend.
Back in Hollywood, the quickening tempo of Marilyn's career would bring her the leading role in the 7-Year Itch. The arc lights of movie stardom would blank out the cozy, candlelit, home-cooked dinners DiMaggio wanted. For Marilyn, it would be easier to please the crowd. Marilyn's silent childhood plea had been, look at me, see me, I'm a person. Now everyone could see her, 4 stories high. It was a different person.
Oh, I think it's terrifically nice, some girl.
I think it's very nice, but I'd rather it were me.
I said, what has Marilyn Monroe got that a million other women have and prefer not to show?
I think it's wonderful. I think it's wonderful, wonderful, wonderful.
Well, that's pretty vulgar, if you ask me.
Joe DiMaggio, it was said, shared that opinion. After only 9 months, the marriage broke wide open before the masked microphones and cameras of the press corps, hastily summoned to the DiMaggio lawn by the Fox publicity chiefs. DiMaggio left any announcement to Marilyn, who in turn left the word to famed Hollywood counsel Jerry Giesler.
Miss Monroe will have nothing to say this morning. All I can say as her attorney is that this is what we would say with the conflict of careers. And as regrettable as it may be, it will have to be presented in the proper place at the proper time.
Marilyn was learning that public favor is a possessive and feline creature. Pet it, and it may purr. Deny it, and it may eat you up. It will invade the last chamber of privacy, treat anguish as a charade, demand a quote from the deathbed. Marilyn would again hear the roar of the animal. At 20th Century Fox, tensions long had been rising between studio and star. The dumb blonde was beginning to pay off, and the studio saw no reason to change. Marilyn felt herself prisoner of an idiot sex symbol. She was a person, she insisted, not a commodity. In December 1954, claiming breach of contract by Fox, Marilyn fled to New York, found sanctuary with photographer Milton Green and his wife. Always a fresh lump of clay that everyone wanted to mold and thumb and shape, Marilyn had found a new Pygmalion. As partner in her new company, Green set out to create the new Monroe. Monroe did begin to emerge, somehow freer, more open, casual. Without makeup, she often seemed like a young girl. New York was an exploration. She'd begun the painful inward journey of psychoanalysis, and now she'd begun timidly to attend the renowned actor studio. Its roster of professional actors became her new family. Its director, Lee Strasberg, and his wife, Paula, the parental figures who henceforth would dominate her career.
Marilyn always dreamt of being an actress. She didn't, by the way, dream of being a star. She dreamt of being an actress. And she had always lived somehow with that dream. And that is why, despite the fact that she became one of the unusual and outstanding stars of all time, she herself was never satisfied. When she came to New York, she began to perceive the possibilities of really accomplishing her dream of being an actress. When Marilyn was here at the studio, she always sat in the same place, which was way at the end there in the last row.
Marilyn was learning that the experiences of childhood need not destroy her. Understood and expressed, they could become part of her unique vocabulary as an actress. If ever there were a warm summer in the life of Marilyn, it was the one now beginning. She met celebrated authors and artists. Many became her friends. Carl Sandburg was a devoted companion. Edith Sitwell chatted with her. Truman Capote danced with her. Playwright Arthur Miller gave her reading lists, explained big words, and said of her, she's alive. After 14 months, Marilyn returned to Hollywood to play the honky-tonk singer in Bus Stop, a characterization which would win astonished praise. Fox had yielded important concessions.
How do you feel about coming back to Hollywood? Is it a happy time for you, or is it
Yes, it is. It's a very happy time. I'm happy to be back. As I said, it's my hometown.
Yes.
Well, you're happy too now.
When you go to London?
Yes,
I'm much happier now. I'm very pleased.
Is it true that you submitted a list of directors that you would work with? We only know the rumors we hear, you know.
I would rather say that I have director approval, and that is true.
This you think is important?
Yes, it is. Very important to me.
You're wearing a high-hat dress now. The last time I saw you wear it. Is this a new Marilyn, a new style?
No, I'm the same person, but it's a different suit.
5 months later, in New York, came the startling announcement. Arthur Miller was exchanging the role of teacher for that of lover and husband. Angular, tight-lipped Miller seemed an unlikely hero for the sex goddess. Skeptics called them the Owl and the Pussycat, gave the marriage a short lease. The Owl was enraptured. The couple was confident.
Miss Monroe, could you tell us what kind of a wedding you're going to have?
Very quiet, I hope.
Do you feel certain at this time that you will be able to get away to go to England?
I feel certain I'm going to try awfully hard.
In the event that you are not able to go, will Miss Monroe still go?
Oh, sure. She's got to go. She's got a contract to go.
Well, that means you may not have a honeymoon together then.
I think we will.
I hope so.
In the older Millers, Marilyn found secure and enduring affection. She and Arthur managed to have not one quiet wedding, but two. One civil, one Jewish. Determined to be the complete wife for Miller, she took instruction in the Jewish faith, tried her hand at gardening, learned to cook chicken soup. Marital bliss was interrupted by professional commitment. With Miller, Marilyn flew to London, where Hollywood's dumb blonde would appear in her own production of The Prince and the Showgirl, with the supremely respected artist, Sir Laurence Olivier. Between Marilyn and Olivier, who also directed, there were occasional reports of strain. But what the world saw, off-screen and on, was a reprise of all its fairy tales. Like the waltz itself, Marilyn was whirling higher and higher, faster and faster, until, as in all fairy tales, there was a perfect confrontation. The orphan girl meeting the real queen. It even seemed, unlike the fairy tale, that the clock might never again strike midnight. Returning from London, the Millers came home. Not to Hollywood, but to New York. At their East River apartment, Marilyn settled into the role of housewife and often walked in the small, friendly park nearby with his children and nursemaids. Children feel her love instantly, her husband said. At last, she could hope for children of her own. But some dark undertow, some inexorable, outgoing tide had begun to flow in Marilyn's life. Successive miscarriages shook her confidence, renewed old fears. Beginning early in her career, Marilyn had relied on barbiturates to sleep, to place an insulating gauze between her and reality. Now, increasingly, she sought this merciful anesthesia. Failing her achievement as a mother, she decided to go back to work in a comedy, Some Like It Hot. The good spirits of the launching party soon would be shaken by Marilyn's vagueness and need for endless retakes. Later, director Billy Wilder would insist he deserved the Purple Heart. Vague or not, her performance had a new sparkle. As the heroine trying to catch Tony Curtis, a supposed millionaire, Marilyn's dumb blonde had become a deft comic invention instead of a cliché.
I spent 6 months in Vienna with Professor Freud, flat on my back. Then there were the Mayo brothers, injections, hypnosis, mineral baths. If I wasn't such a coward, I'd kill myself.
Don't say that. There must be some girl someplace that could.
If I ever found a girl that could, I'd marry her just like that.
Would you do me a favor?
Certainly. What is it?
I may not be Dr. Freud or a Mayo brother or one of those French upstairs girls, but could I take another crack at it?
All right, if you insist. afraid not. Terribly sorry.
With her unsmiling husband at the premiere of Some Like It Hot, Marilyn strutted for the fans. She had the right. The picture was a smash. She was getting 10% of the gross. Life with Marilyn had penalties. It was, said Arthur Miller, like living in a fishbowl. Starved in childhood, Marilyn's emotional demands have become disruptive and exhausting. She built Miller a soundproof study, but in 5 years he completed only one work, a screenplay which I directed in Nevada in the hot summer of 1960, The Misfits. In the production, Marilyn played opposite a lifelong hero and father image, Clark Gable, the old king, whose last picture this would be. There were moments of playful tenderness. Marilyn herself still had that oddly childlike quality, something innocent and unspoiled. But time and life had done her considerable damage. She took so many sleeping pills to rest that in the morning she had to take stimulants to wake her up. And this ravaged the girl. She broke down, and I had to send her to a hospital for a week before we could go on with the shooting. Miller's heroine, of course, closely resembled Marilyn. Sometimes I had the eerie sense that we were in another dimension, that we were hearing Marilyn's own cry against the brutal violations of her life.
Yes. Why are you killing you?
Just stand aside, honey.
Okay, you won. All right, you won. You won.
Let go of that rope. Get out of here. Follow him. Shook him down, Guido. Get off. You want him? Get him. President, shut up and pull that horse down. Get up. 1, 2, now.
I'm feeling much better, thank you.
I'm glad to hear that. Mike. We're going to call her. You say you're feeling better?
Yes, much better, thank you. Now, honey, go to America. I don't have
The Misfits became the Miller's own epitaph. There was a Mexican divorce, and there were reports of suicide attempts by Marilyn. In the following months, she twice vanished into mental hospitals, and emerging, ran the gauntlet of the press.
Push him off. Get him off. Get him off. Get him off. Get him off. I got the movie. All the way.
Marilyn fled to Florida. In her months of crisis, an old friend had reappeared at her side. Protected by Joe DiMaggio, Marilyn tried to find her bearings. She felt tired. Like a faltering aircraft, she was losing dangerously momentum. And now, ahead of her, a last picture commitment to Fox loomed like the mountain wall of Everest. Marilyn returned to Hollywood and, encouraged by a new analyst, bought a house. Mrs. Eunice Murray, appointed by Marilyn's doctor, psychiatric aide, and companion, helped Marilyn plan furnishings for the house.
The house was so important for Marilyn, the doctor thought it would take the place of a baby or a husband. She liked the protected feeling of the heavy beams of the ceilings that were simple and unadorned, but so strong, and the thick walls, and the white carpet that was soft and silent, and seemed to envelop one when you went into the house.
In April, amid cautious optimism, Something's Got to Give began shooting at Fox. But quickly the old patterns returned. Pleas of illness kept Marilyn from work, but not from an appearance at President Kennedy's birthday party in New York's Madison Square Garden.
Mr. President, on this occasion of your birthday, this lovely lady is not only punctilious, but punctual. Mr. President, Marilyn Monroe. A woman about whom it truly may be said she needs no introduction. Let me just say, here she is. But I'll give her an introduction anyway, Mr. President, because in the history of show business, perhaps there has been no one female who meant so much, who has done more. Mr. President, the late Marilyn Monroe.
President, for all the things you've done, the battles that you've won, the way you deal with U.S. Steel and our problems by the ton. We thank you so much. Everybody, happy birthday!
Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States.
Thank you. I can now retire from politics after having had Happy Birthday sung to me in such a sweet, wholesome way.
2 weeks later, Fox stopped the production and filed suit. Of 31 shooting days, Marilyn had come to the set only 12. She withdrew into her walled garden, while her attorneys tried to patch up the breach with Fox. Her psychiatrist saw her daily. Marilyn took walks, gave interviews, but her moods changed rapidly. Pill bottles crowded her night table. In 6 weeks, she spent $2,300 for hairstyling and makeup to face several interviews and dinners with friends. Often it was easier just to drowse through the days. On August 4th at 8:30, Marilyn bade Mrs. Murray good night and retired with her private telephone. Unknown to her psychiatrist, she had 25 Nenbutol sleeping pills. In the next hours, she would take them all.
About an hour later, there was a telephone call from Marilyn's attorney. He asked if Marilyn was all right. And I said, as far as I know, she is. The light was on in her room, and the telephone cord was under the door. And these were indications that she was still awake. About 2 in the morning, when I saw that the light was still on in her room, this was my first concern, that there might be something wrong. So I tried the door, and it was locked. I knocked at the door and called Marilyn's name several times, and there was no answer.
There was no answer. At 3:35, the doctors pronounced her dead. Again, the reporters, the questions. Always Marilyn had lived at the edge of a precipice. But had she leaped or fallen? The official verdict was delivered by the coroner.
Miss Monroe has suffered from psychiatric disturbance for a long time. She had often expressed wishes to give up, to withdraw, and even to die. On more than one occasion in the past, when disappointed and depressed, she had made a suicide attempt using sedative drugs. On these occasions, she had called for help and had been rescued. From the information collected about the events of the evening of August the 4th, it is our opinion that the same pattern was repeated except for the rescue. On the basis of all the information obtained, it is our opinion that the case is a probable suicide.
In the silent streets, the crowd waited. Within the cemetery walls, Lee Strasberg read the eulogy.
Marilyn Monroe was a legend, but I have no words to describe the myth and the legend. I did not know this Marilyn Monroe. We gathered here today knew only Marilyn, a warm human being, impulsive and shy, sensitive and fear of rejection, yet ever avid for life and reaching out for fulfillment.
The cortege was a company of strangers, her last professional advisors, a few random figures from the past. Like the scattered parts of her life, each hardly knew the other. Marilyn Monroe, age 36, died en route to a destination she never reached. She was seeking the oldest of rainbows, to be herself and unafraid. Today, fresh roses nod beside her crypt. From time to time, other bouquets arrive from persons she never met in places far away. The Norma Jean, so full of daydreams, now lives in the dreams of others. But even in life, such adoration is not enough. Across the continent, among the created effects of Marilyn Monroe was a single unused possession that she kept with her through all her adult years. The second-hand white piano her mother had bought, symbol of a childhood that never happened.
I wanna be loved by you. The doodly 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 dum. Boop boop doop doop.